The honourable member for Truro, Bible Hill, Millbrook, Salmon River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, my first question today is for the Minister of Finance regarding the film and television tax credits. We've now heard what the government is planning to do, and I have to say that in talking with my peers in the industry, everybody is devastated by this decision of this government. They thought it was going to be bad, but they didn't know how bad, and they're feeling they're feeling that they were lied to by the government, who promised they would keep the television tax credit for the next 5 years. So my question for the minister is this: when did they decide they were going to gut the film and television tax credit as they have done? Has it been lately, or did they know this all along? Thank you.
The honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think it's really important that we start by stating the fact that film credit remains, the criteria remain. The maximum amount you could ask for is 65% of labour if you're eligible. None of those criteria have changed. The difference is how it will be paid out, Mr. Speaker. That's the one difference. We're asking that the industry look at this, move forward with us, and find ways to remain vibrant and here in the province.
The honourable member for Truro, Bible Hill, Millbrook, Salmon River.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I thank the minister for her answer, and I know it's very difficult being a minister in a government, especially a majority government, where you need to toe the line and do whatever you're told to do. However, I also know she understands the importance of this industry to Nova Scotia. What I don't think that she understands is that this is going to devastate the industry. And so my next question is for the Premier, and that is, does the Premier actually understand why the film tax credit is set up the way it is? Because right now, Nova Scotia is again at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to film tax credits in Canada. And Ontario, for instance, has a 35% tax credit plus stackables on top of that. So we are now at the bottom of the list, and that means our productions are going to go elsewhere. So how does the Premier suggest they're going to actually grow our creative economy in this environment?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I again want to echo what the Minister of Finance says. The criteria for the film tax credit has not changed, Mr. Speaker. You're still eligible for 50% tax credit and 65% in certain conditions, Mr. Speaker. Fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, in this province, how it's delivered has changed. 25% of it is Mr. Speaker, it's like the former government used to say about a forgivable loan. We used to call those grants, Mr. Speaker. This is not a tax credit. It's a non-refundable tax credit, Mr. Speaker. We put it out the door without anyone paying taxes. Do they actually think that we provide services to Nova Scotians without taxable income? What do they tell for autistic children? We don't have any money to invest you because we're giving non-forgivable grants, Mr. Speaker. What do they tell for those people on wait lists, Mr. Speaker? We don't have any money because we're giving non-forgivable grants, Mr. Speaker. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, we've continued to invest in these tax credits.
Order, please. The Honourable Premier has the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, the film tax credit still exists in this province. We're going to continue to move forward, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very proud of the fact that we've created, Mr. Speaker, another fund for the creative economy, Mr.
Order,
Speaker,
please.
that will be broader.
Time allotted for oral questions by members to ministers has expired. The Honourable Member for Truro, Bible Hill, Millbrook, Salmon River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it gives me pleasure to rise to my feet today to discuss this bill. I'm very much in favour of it. I think it's I think it's a great bill, and it's following along in what we set in motion as the NDP government several years ago, when we made it possible for amendments to the Human Rights Act that protect transgender people from discrimination. We did that in 2012. And we approved covering the costs for reassignment surgeries, also in 2012. And I think it's great that now guidelines are being developed for schools and school boards to create a culture that's safe, respectful, and supportive of transgender and gender non-conforming students. And I am very glad that we are committed to bring forward amendments for this new requirements to change the sex on a birth certificate during our session right now, our spring session. So, Mr. Speaker, when I first became an MLA in Truro, one of my first assignments was a couple of people came into my office who needed they needed to have their birth certificates found, and they also needed their names changed. One young woman had been moved around from foster homes to foster homes, and she'd basically lost her identity. She was having terrible trouble with some drugs and alcohol problems, and also abuse suffered in foster homes. And she was a really lost soul. And she didn't have any proof of who she was. She had no ID. And so I took it upon myself and my staff to help her try and find her identity, basically, and to help her get her life straightened out. And as an MLA in this House, I think these are the types of jobs and these types of projects that really make us feel good about what we're doing. You know, when you can help make one person's life a little easier and a little better and make them feel good about themselves, and especially being a woman and caring about women's issues and other women who are having trouble out there in the world, having trouble getting jobs, having troubles, you know, with their lives. And again, identity is a very important thing for everybody. So I managed to help this young woman get her life together. It took a long time, and we even managed to get her a name change. She wanted to have her name changed because she had several different last names from all the different homes she'd been in, and she wanted to choose which name she wanted to go with for the rest of her life, and I helped her to do that. However, then I had another person come into my office who was a gentleman who wanted to be a woman and felt that he is a woman. And in fact, she wanted a name change and was told by the Community Services Department that, in fact, that it was impossible, that she did not fit the requirements and could not have her name changed. But she felt that she was a woman. She dressed like a woman. She was waiting for surgery and wanted to be assigned. And so I felt that there was a discrepancy here and some injustice that was being done, and also that it was discriminatory in the attitude between one person versus the other, who deserves to have their name change paid for when they are on income assistance and who doesn't. And so again, we fought long and hard, and we managed to get permission to change this person's name, and now she has a female name and is really proud of herself because she can actually have the name that she identifies with. Again, these are the types of things that I think are new for some people in not just Nova Scotia, but around the world. And here in Nova Scotia, I think many people, it's new, the whole idea of gender being on a whole a line, that there's many different types of genders and a mixture of genders, and that in fact most people, you have your mother and your father inside of you, and so some people can identify more with one than the other, and some people have both. And so one of the things that I'm the most proud of doing in my 6 years in government, is helping people like this to find themselves. So my other experience with this first began when I was a young actor coming up the ranks, living in Toronto, partly because there was no film work or television work in Nova Scotia, so I had to go to Toronto. And one of my very first best friends in the industry was a person named Craig Russell. People in the industry would remember him, but his name he's not as talked about as much anymore. He was a female impersonator. And he did a movie called Outrageous. And then he did a second movie called Too Outrageous. And Craig always prided himself because he was a man, but he said he had 16 different women trapped inside of him. And so he never wanted to have a sex change operation, but he said, you try living with 16 different women trapped inside of you and see how you do in society. But he used it to his advantage because he was a hairstylist in Toronto, but he loved many famous women, including Mae West. Mae West was his hero. And he became the president of the Mae West Fan Club of Canada. He was 19 years old at the time, And he wrote to Mae West in Hollywood and kept her abreast of what he was doing for her, all the meetings he was having and things like this in her honor. And he finally asked her, he would love to be able to work for her. And Mae West, after, a year or two of hearing from this young man, Craig Russell, said, well, if I put you on a bus, if I send you a bus ticket to Hollywood, you get on the bus, we'll be waiting for you at the end, and I'll give you a job as my personal assistant. So young Craig Russell from Toronto, Ontario, got on a Greyhound bus and ended up in Hollywood for the first time, where he was Mae West's personal assistant. And he got to talk to people like Marlene Dietrich, all kinds of people on the phone that would call her and come to visit her. And at the time, she was older, and she had a stable of young men that were very handsome that came and went around her pool and used her pool, and she just encouraged them to come around, and it helped her image, I'm sure, and it also was part of who she was, because she identified herself as one of the first early sex symbols, really, of North America, and the gay community loved her because she got it. She really got it at a time when a lot of people didn't. She was a vaudeville star. She'd worked with many different types of people on the circuit, and she was welcoming. She was like the Liz Taylor, really, of her day, where she welcomed and accepted and encouraged people to be themselves. And so young Craig Russell actually learned how to impersonate Mae. She was one of his first impersonations. And then he went on from there to learn how to do Marlene Dietrich. He did Barbra Streisand. He did Janis Joplin. He did, Liza Minnelli. He did a whole lot of them. And then by the time I actually met him, he was already a movie star by this time, and he'd done shows at Lincoln Center. And he was one of the first people in Canada who got the name out for transgenders, for female impersonators, to start to give them some dignity and to make them proud of themselves and proud of who they were and proud of coming out on Gay Pride Day and shouting out and saying, I am who I am and I'm proud of it. I met him when I was 20. I had just done the Marilyn Monroe musical called Hey Marilyn, that I starred in Edmonton, and I'd done my first film called The Hounds of Notre Dame in Wilcox, Saskatchewan. And I met him at the Toronto ACTRA Film Awards, where he had been hired to play Judy Garland. That was one of his characters. He was playing Judy Garland at this awards ceremony, and they had asked me to come in and play Marilyn Monroe. And at the very first rehearsal that we did for the awards ceremony, I showed up, and they announced that I was there, and I heard this voice from the front of the house going, where is she? Let me see this girl who can play Marilyn Monroe. She's my competition. I want to look at her in the eyes. And up came Craig, and he had a feather boa on, and he had a bunch of different things on. I think he had his Mae West wig on, and he had his nails and some dark glasses in the theater, and very, very eccentric and wonderful. And so I said, hi, yeah, I'm Lenore, and I play Marilyn, and I don't dress like Marilyn. I don't put the makeup on in my real life, but yeah, I play Marilyn. So we met, we sat down together. He said, well, I want to talk to you. And I looked at him, and I said, take your dark glasses off. I said, I want to see your eyes. And he goes, why? And I said, well, Craig, I want to see your eyes because I want to know who you are. I don't want to meet Mae West. I don't want to meet Judy Garland. I don't want to meet any of your 16 women that are trapped inside you. I want to meet you because you're the one that's important. So he took off his glasses very tentatively, timidly, and he looked me in the eyes, and he had these beautiful blue eyes. And I said, oh my God. I said, you have the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. And he said, really? I said, yeah. I said, you're beautiful. You're a handsome man, and you're a beautiful woman. I said, and you got the best legs I've ever seen. And he changed. He became softer. He became himself. And he felt totally accepted by me. And we became best friends from then on. And he actually said he was never going to play Marilyn Monroe ever again because he felt that I played her better. And he never did touch Marilyn Monroe ever again. But he had me to his shows, and he had me come and visit him in Los Angeles. And then my first visit to Hollywood was to visit him. And as I was taken to all the different clubs and shows in Hollywood where he was a star. He had a limousine, he had fur coats, mink coats. He had coats made for me and for him, and we'd go to these different things. I mean, it was really fun for a young Nova Scotian woman to be feted and introduced to Hollywood in this way. He also took me to the underbelly of Hollywood, where the gay clubs were just rife with life and pulsating with energy and enthusiasm, and all kinds of young men and young women who were just starting to really appreciate who they were and not be afraid to come out and talk about it. And so one night he did a show, and this relates to this bill, Mr. Speaker, because again, it talks about who people really are and their identity and how important this is. I saw the show. He was so good that night. People loved him. They threw roses on the stage. Backstage, he got buckets of roses sent. All kinds of people lined up wanting to see him, telling him what a wonderful star he was. But he wouldn't come out of his dressing room. So I knocked on the door, and he went, "Who is it?" And I said, "Oh, it's Lenore." And he went, "Oh, okay, well, come in." I came in, and he had tears streaming down his face. Black mascara all over the place, just in a mess. And then he threw himself at his dressing table and he said, "Oh my God, I can't take it anymore." And I said, "Well, Craig, what's wrong?" I said, "They love you out there. What's the problem?" And he goes, "They don't love me. They love them. They love her. They don't love me." And I said, "No," I said, "Craig, you are each of these people. You are the essence of these people. You're underneath these people. The people out there that are clapping, they're clapping for you. They're not clapping for Barbara Streisand or Mae West or any of these people. They love you, and I love you. You are a special and unique and talented human being, and you need to start to love yourself." And I know I've talked about this theme in this House before when it comes to mental health issues, things like this. But I think that is really, really important for our society as a whole, for people that are struggling with their identity, for people who are struggling with mental health issues, for people who are struggling with substance abuse issues. Until we learn that we can't fill the gaping hole inside of ourselves with outside things, with drugs or alcohol or the attention of others or fame or fortune or money or power, it doesn't make any difference. You can fill it up with all that stuff and it'll still be a black hole that's empty, that is, it will never be filled. The only thing that will fill it is your own self-acceptance, self-love, and stop looking for approval from others. And that was my lesson for him. And here I was, 20 years old. He was 36 or something. But the one thing that I've always had is that, a compass, an inner compass, what my colleague from the South Shore would call, from Queen Shelby, would call a dead reckoning. Dead reckoning. It's a nautical term, but I relate to it. Because without that dead reckoning, you're adrift at sea. You have nothing. You're just floating around looking for what? Looking for yourself, looking for the purpose of life, looking for what? So I think we all need to realize that dead reckoning is so important for each and every individual in our society, including ourselves here in this room. And so I would just like to end on the note that helping our constituents and the people of Nova Scotia find their own identity and accept themselves, and for us to embrace them and to celebrate them and to give them all the encouragement we can to not be afraid to come out and be who they are, and do it in the schools, do it right from day one in primary on, and encourage them to find out who they are and to pass these kinds of laws that help them. That's what I'm here for, and that's what I'm proud of being an MLA in this government. So with that, I will take my place, and I do thank the government for this bill. Thank you very much.